I was one signature away from handing her everything, until I froze in the hallway and heard her laughing about it with him. She'd been running her plan for 8 months while I sat across from her at dinner every night. Every word, she said, just bought her a front row seat to her own downfall. My name is Stephen Langley. I'm 47 years old. I co-own an environmental consulting firm based out of Charlotte, North Carolina, the kind of company that advises industrial clients on regulatory compliance, land remediation, waste management contracts. We built it over 12 years from a 2-person operation in a rented office above a dry cleaner to a staff of 19 and contracts with 4 state agencies. I'm proud of that. I earned it. I've been married to Pamela for 14 years. She's 42, sharp, good-looking in a way that photographs well. And for most of our marriage, I would have called her my partner in every sense of the word. She handled the household finances, managed our investment accounts, and sat across from me at more dinner tables than I can count while I talked through business decisions she always seemed genuinely interested in. I thought we were solid. I thought we built something that held weight. Looking back now, I can see the warning signs I chose to walk past. The long stretches of silence that didn't feel like peace. The way she'd look at her phone and set it face down before I could ask who texted. The evenings she started spending at networking events for a professional women's group she joined 18 months ago. I told myself those were the signs of a woman staying active, staying engaged. I told myself a lot of things. If I could go back and change one decision, it would be this. I would have paid attention sooner. Not out of suspicion, but out of the basic respect a man owes himself. The kind that says you deserve to know what's happening in your own house. But I didn't. And so we arrived at that Thursday morning in October. The divorce had been my idea. We'd had a rough year, distant, cold, more like roommates than spouses. I'd suggested counseling twice. She declined twice. So I did what I thought was the mature thing. I consulted a lawyer, Carolyn Drake, who had the kind of quiet, measured confidence that made you feel like the situation was already under control. We drafted the paperwork. I signed my copy. The plan was to hand-deliver the documents to Carolyn's office that afternoon and let the process begin. I was dressed and ready by 9. Suit jacket on the chair, briefcase by the door, signed documents in a manila envelope tucked inside. I went back down the hall for my travel mug. Coffee, black, same as every morning for 20 years. That's when I heard her. Pamela was in the kitchen. I could tell by the direction of her voice, low and loose, the way she talked when she thought no one was within earshot. There was another voice on the line, male, self-assured, with a laugh that arrived before the punchline did. I stopped in the hallway, 6 feet from the kitchen doorway, and I stood there like a man who had just stepped on ice and was waiting to find out how thick it was. He has no idea, Pamela said. He's been so wrapped up in that company, he hasn't noticed anything for months. The male voice replied, warm with amusement. And the papers? He's actually filing. He thinks he is. She laughed, and it wasn't a nervous laugh or a guilty one. It was the laugh of someone who believed they were running the table. Once he signs everything over and walks out the door, we move. The accounts, the business share, the property. All of it transfers clean. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The travel mug stayed on the hallway shelf. She kept talking. Lance, I've been setting this up for 8 months. He's going to hand me everything and think it was his own idea. Lance. The name landed like a stone dropped in still water. I was one signature away from handing her everything. And then I stood in that hallway and heard her laughing about it with him. Every single word out of her mouth was buying her a front row seat to her own downfall. She just didn't know it yet. I didn't walk into the kitchen. I didn't say a word. I turned around, walked back to the study at the far end of the house, and closed the door behind me without a sound. My hands were steady. That surprised me a little. I sat down at my desk, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out the folder I'd labeled reference. Legal 3 years ago during a contract dispute with a county agency. Inside were copies of our prenuptial agreement, the original business registration documents, the deed to our home, and a USB drive I'd encrypted with Carolyn's office after a health scare 2 years back made me think about what I'd leave behind. I thought about Pamela's voice. Easy, rehearsed, completely unbothered. 8 months. She'd said 8 months. I opened my phone and typed one message to Carolyn. Don't file. Need to meet today. In person. Then I put the phone face down on the desk and sat quietly for a moment, listening to the house around me. Somewhere down the hall, Pamela was still laughing. Let her. I sat in that study for 40 minutes before I moved again. Not because I was paralyzed. I've never been that kind of man. I sat there because I needed to think clearly, and clear thinking requires stillness. My father used to say that a man who acts on heat alone burns down his own house. I wasn't going to burn anything down. Not yet. The folder was open in front of me. I went through it page by page, methodically, the way I review a regulatory compliance report before signing off on it. The prenuptial agreement came first, 12 pages, signed by both of us the year we got married, notarized by Pamela's own cousin as a favor, notarized by Pamela's own cousin as a favor. I found what I was looking for on page 8. Clause 11. In the event that either party engages in deliberate misrepresentation regarding shared or individual assets, the injured party retains full discretionary rights over those assets pending arbitration, without requirement of prior negotiation. Pamela had signed directly beneath it. Her signature hadn't changed in 14 years. I set the prenup aside and pulled up our joint account on my laptop. I wasn't looking for anything dramatic. I was looking for a pattern. And there it was, small transfers over the past 7 months, always rounded figures, always labeled with something mundane. Grocery run, home supplies, car maintenance. Individually, nothing alarming. Together, they told a story. Nearly $40,000, moved in quiet increments to an account I didn't recognize. I opened a new spreadsheet and started logging every transaction. Date, amount, destination. I didn't rush. I just worked. Around noon, I heard Pamela leave the house. The garage door opened. The car backed out. The neighborhood went quiet again. I waited until the sound of her engine faded before I picked up my phone and called my cousin Ray. Ray Brunner is 48, runs a general contracting business out of Raleigh, and has been my closest friend since we were teenagers throwing a football in my grandmother's backyard. He'd met Pamela at our wedding and liked her well enough, but 2 Christmases ago he'd pulled me aside after dinner and said, quietly, "Steve, I don't know what's going on with her lately, but something's off. Just keep your eyes open." I told him he was reading too much into things. He picked up on the second ring. "I owe you an apology," I said. A pause. Then Ray's voice, "Careful, what happened?" I told him. Not everything. Not the spreadsheet. Not the legal details, but enough. The conversation I'd overheard. The name Lance. The 8 months she'd mentioned like it was a project timeline. Ray didn't say "I told you so." That's one of the things I've always respected about him. He just exhaled slowly and said, "Okay, what do you need? I need you to think back. Anything you noticed about Pamela in the last year? People she mentioned, places she went when she visited Raleigh, anything that seemed off. I need details, not impressions." He thought for a moment. There was a guy at Dana Hollis's birthday thing back in March. Pamela introduced him as someone from her professional group. Lance something. I didn't catch the last name. He shook my hand like he already owned the room. Lance something. March. That was 7 months ago. Did she introduce him to you specifically? Or was he just there? I pressed. She brought him over. Ray said flatly. Steered him right to our group. At the time I figured he was just a contact. But the way she watched him when he talked. Steve, I noticed it. I just didn't think it was my place to say anything. I wrote the name down. Lance. Professional group. March. After the call, I went back to the folder. I pulled out the USB drive, the one I'd encrypted with Carolyn's office 2 years ago, and plugged it into my laptop. Inside, backup copies of every major document. The business partnership agreement, the original property deed with its pre-joint title annotations, insurance policies, the secondary filing that reassigned survivorship rights to my family trust contingent on a specific legal breach. I'd put that last one in at Carolyn's suggestion and promptly forgotten about it. Now I was very glad I hadn't argued against it. I printed 12 pages and organized them into a new folder. Then I sent Carolyn a second message, bringing documents. This afternoon if possible. It's not what we thought. She replied in under 3 minutes. I have at 2 o'clock. Come then. I closed the laptop, straightened the desk, and walked to the kitchen for the coffee I'd never made that morning. Standing at the counter, I looked out the window at the backyard. The oak tree we planted the first spring we lived here, the stone patio. I'd laid myself over a long Labor Day weekend. I'd built this life with both hands. She'd been quietly dismantling it for 8 months, and she'd smiled at me across the dinner table every single night while she did it. I poured the coffee and drank it standing up. Then I picked up my briefcase and went to see Carolyn. Carolyn Drake's office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown that smelled like old carpet and serious money. She'd been practicing family and business law for over 20 years, and the way she moved through a case, steady, unhurried, precise, was exactly what I needed that afternoon. I laid everything on her conference table. The prenup, the spreadsheet, the USB drive contents, printed and organized. The note I'd made about Lance from Ray's call. She read without interrupting, which I appreciated. Lawyers who talk while they read make me nervous. When she finished, she folded her hands on the table and looked at me directly. "How long have you known?" "Since this morning," I said. She nodded slowly. "Then we're ahead of her. That matters more than you think." Carolyn walked me through the legal framework with the kind of clarity that turned a complicated situation into something manageable. Clause 11 of the prenup was solid. She drafted it herself, and it had been reviewed by Pamela's own attorney before signing. The asset transfers I'd flagged were potentially recoverable if we could establish intent. The business ownership structure, she reminded me, had a licensing clause that made any transfer of intellectual property or client contracts impossible without my direct authorization and original signatory verification. Pamela didn't know about that clause. I'd buried it in the original partnership agreement years before we even discussed marriage. "She can't take the firm," Carolyn said simply. "Not a contract, not a client, not a trademark. It's legally insulated." "What about the house?" Carolyn allowed herself a small, precise smile. "You added her to the deed for tax purposes 9 years ago. But the original survivorship filing assigns full reversion to your family trust in the event of demonstrated intent to defraud. The language is triggered by what you overheard." She tapped the prenup. Combined with Clause 11, she walks away with what she came in with. I sat with that for a moment. "I want to know who Lance is," I said. "Full name, background, his connection to her, and whether there's a legal exposure." "I'll have someone on it by tomorrow morning," Carolyn replied, already making notes. I drove home feeling something I hadn't expected. Not relief, not anger, but focus. The sharp, clean kind that comes when a complicated problem finally shows you its edges. Pamela was in the kitchen when I walked in, making dinner like it was any other Thursday. She looked up and gave me the kind of smile that used to mean something. "How was the meeting?" she asked. "Productive," I said, setting my briefcase down. "A lot to work through, but we're making progress." She turned back to the stove. "You seem tired." "Long day." I poured myself a glass of water and leaned against the counter, watching her move around the kitchen with that practiced ease. 8 months. She'd been carrying this for 8 months and hadn't dropped it once. I gave her nothing to read in my face. Nothing at all. 2 days later, Carolyn called with a name. Lance Salinger, 43, formerly a senior account manager at a regional investment advisory firm, until a compliance violation ended his tenure 18 months ago. Since then, a newly formed LLC, Salinger Venture Group, registered 3 months ago in North Carolina with one listed contact for business correspondence. Pamela's email address. She hadn't even used a separate account. "He's not just a boyfriend," I said. "No," Carolyn confirmed. "He's her exit vehicle. They're planning to run assets through his LLC and establish him as a managing partner in a consultancy built on your firm's client base and contracts." She paused, which, as we've established, they cannot legally do. I thanked her, ended the call, and sat at my desk for a long moment. Then I called Ray. "I need a favor," I told him. "Nothing complicated. I just need you to be available if I need a witness to something in the next few weeks." Ray didn't hesitate for even half a second. "Name the time and place," he said. "I've got you, Steve." That was the only answer I needed. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon while I was reviewing a soil remediation proposal for a county contract. Unknown number. I almost let go to voicemail. Something made me answer. The voice was male, unhurried, with the particular confidence of a man who believes he's already holding the better hand. "Mr. Langley, I think we should talk like adults before this gets messy." I leaned back in my chair and kept my voice completely neutral. "Who is this?" "Someone with a mutual interest in a clean resolution," he said. "I'm going to be direct with you. Pamela and I have made plans. You filing or not filing doesn't really change the direction of things. What does change is how smooth the transition is. I'd rather this be smooth for everyone. Lance Salinger, in the flesh, so to speak. He kept going, filling the silence I'd deliberately left him. There's no reason this has to turn into a legal battle. You walk away with the firm intact. We're not interested in the day-to-day operations. We just need the infrastructure, client relationships, the state agency contracts, the licensing registrations. You'd be surprised how reasonable this arrangement could look on paper. I let him finish. Then I said, very quietly, I appreciate you calling. A pause. He hadn't expected that. So you're open to? I didn't say that. I cut in. I said I appreciate the call. There's a difference. I ended it there, set the phone on the desk, and immediately sent Carolyn a text with a timestamp and a summary of the conversation. She replied within minutes, documented. Keep your phone backed up. That call was a gift. She was right. A man threatening to take your business infrastructure over the phone was not a man making smart decisions. What he didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that I'd already started laying the counter trap. The previous evening, I'd left a document on the corner of my desk, slightly visible, facing the door. It looked like a routine financial summary, account headers, property lines, business valuations. A casual observer might assume it was an asset overview prepared for the divorce proceedings. What it actually contained was a set of numbers I constructed specifically to mislead, inflated account balances in accounts I'd already restructured, a property valuation that reflected an outdated figure, a business revenue line that omitted the protected IP clause entirely. Bait, clean and deliberate. Pamela passed my desk 3 times that day. The third time, she slowed. That evening at dinner, she was noticeably warmer. Poured me iced tea without being asked. Asked about the county contract with what sounded like genuine interest. I answered calmly, gave her just enough detail to seem unguarded, and watched her file it all away behind those careful eyes. Then came the moment that nearly broke my composure. Tammy Briggs, Pamela's closest friend, a woman I'd always found slightly too loud for enclosed spaces, stopped by unannounced around 7. She and Pamela went out to the back patio with a bottle of wine. I was in the study with the window cracked, not intentionally positioned, just working. Their voices drifted in. Does he know you already talked to someone? Tammy asked. Pamela's reply was quick. No, and he won't. Lance has his own attorney reviewing the business filing. It's being structured so it looks like a standard consulting partnership. Tammy's voice dropped. And the account transfers. I thought you said those were done. Most of them, Pamela said. There's one more property-linked account I need to access before I pull the trigger. Lance thinks it's already clear, but I told him to wait until after Steven signs. She said it the way you discuss rerouting a delivery. No hesitation. No guilt. Tammy didn't know I could hear her. And Pamela didn't know that what she'd just described, intentional pre-filing asset movement linked to a fraudulent business registration, had a legal name that Carolyn was going to be very interested in hearing. I closed the window quietly, picked up my phone, and typed out everything I just heard word for word while it was still fresh. Then I sent it to Carolyn with one line. She just described the timeline herself. The invitation came from our neighbors, Phil and Donna Kerrigan. Their annual fall cookout, the kind of Charlotte Saturday event where people stand around a gas grill and pretend autumn isn't already slipping away. Pamela had RSVP'd for both of us before things had gotten complicated, and canceling would have raised questions neither of us wanted to answer yet. So we went. I'd been to enough of these gatherings to know how to move through one without giving anything away. Small talk, cold beer, laugh at the right moments. Pamela worked the crowd the way she always did. Fluid, charming, leaving each conversation looking like she'd made someone's afternoon. I watched her from across the yard and tried to remember the last time that ease had felt genuine to me. Then I saw him. He was standing near the drink table, talking to Phil with the relaxed posture of a man who considered most rooms beneath him. Late 40s, well-dressed for a backyard cookout, with the particular smile of someone who'd practiced it in front of a mirror. Pamela drifted toward that side of the yard within 10 minutes of our arrival. She didn't introduce him to me. She didn't need to. Lance Salinger. He was taller than I'd pictured, more polished. He shook Phil's hand with both of his, laughed at something, touched Pamela briefly on the shoulder as he spoke. Casual, proprietary. The kind of touch that assumes permission. I didn't move toward them. I stayed where I was, talked to Donna about her garden, drank half my beer slowly, and watched. Ray had driven up from Raleigh that morning. I'd asked him to come without explaining why, just said I needed him around this weekend. He appeared at my elbow around the time Lance started telling some story that had 3 people laughing. That him? Ray said quietly, not looking in that direction. That's him, I replied. Ray took a slow sip of his drink. I remember him now. From Dana's birthday. He stood the same way then. A pause. Like he's always the main character. I didn't respond. I was watching Pamela's face, the way it shifted when she was near him, softer and more alert at the same time. She used to look at me that way. I could place the exact year it stopped. We left the cookout after 90 minutes. Pamela was quiet in the car, which suited me fine. That night, I lay awake for a while, and my mind went somewhere I'd been avoiding. 7 years ago, the summer we renovated the kitchen. Pamela in paint-stained jeans, laughing at something I'd said while we argued about cabinet hardware. We'd been good then, genuinely good. The kind of couple that other people pointed to. Somewhere between that summer and this one, something had shifted in her. I didn't know exactly when. I used to think it was gradual, just the natural cooling of a long marriage. Now I wasn't sure it had been gradual at all. Now I thought there might have been a specific moment, a specific decision she'd made, and everything after that was just execution. That thought was worse than anger. It settled into me like cold water into stone. In the morning I met Carolyn for coffee and told her about the cookout. She made a note of it without visible reaction, then slid a folder across the table. Lance Salinger's LLC registered 3 months ago, she said. But look at page 3. I turned to it. A consulting services agreement, drafted, not yet executed, naming my firm's 2 largest state agency contracts as transferable partnership assets to be absorbed in a Salinger Venture Group upon completion of the marital dissolution. She'd listed my clients by name. She gave him a client list, I said. She gave him a shopping list, Carolyn corrected, which she had no legal right to share. That document alone is enough to establish intentional misappropriation of proprietary business information. I sat with that for a moment. The specific anger of a man who built something carefully and watched someone treat it like a yard sale item. I want to set the next phase, I told Carolyn. She's been looking at that document on my desk. I want to give her something she can't resist passing to him. Carolyn's expression sharpened. Walk me through it. I did. She listened, asked 2 precise questions, and then nodded once. Do it. I'll have the monitoring framework in place by Thursday. I drove home with a plan and a folder, and for the first time since that Thursday morning in the hallway, I felt the weight begin to shift. I spent 2 evenings building the document. It looked real because most of it was real account headers, real property lines, accurate business structure language. What I changed were the specific figures and one critical omission. The intellectual property clause protecting all client contracts and firm licensing was nowhere in it. To anyone reading quickly, it looked like an unguarded asset overview. The kind of document that might make a person think the door had been left open. I printed it, placed it in a manila folder, and left it on the left corner of my desk on a Tuesday morning before Pamela woke up. Slightly angled, partially visible from the doorway. Then I went to the office and waited. Carolyn's monitoring system, entirely legal, tied to the firm's existing compliance infrastructure, flagged outbound data events from any device on our home network linked to my business domain. I had an alert set to my phone. The notification came at 2:17 that afternoon. File accessed. Photographed via mobile device. Outbound message sent from Pamela's personal email. She hadn't even waited until I was home. I forwarded the alert to Carolyn with one line. She took it. That evening, Pamela was in a noticeably good mood. She made dinner. Pasta, the kind she used to make early in our marriage when she was trying to impress someone. She poured wine, asked about my day with what sounded almost like warmth. I matched her tone exactly. Easy, unhurried, a man seemingly wrapping up a chapter of his life without bitterness. What I was actually doing was watching the timer run down on her plan. 3 days later, Carolyn called. Lance Salinger just filed a preliminary partnership registration using your business entity number, she said. He used the figures from the document you left. The unprotected version. She paused. The filing is fraudulent. He used your federal registration ID without authorization. That's wire fraud, Stephen. She caught herself, Professional calm restored. The metadata on the submission traces back to a device registered to Pamela. Photograph from your home. Transmitted from her email, filed by him. The chain was complete. I asked Carolyn to secure a certified copy of the fraudulent filing and add it to the evidence archive. She'd already done it. One more thing, she added. Our forensic contact traced the financial transfers you flagged. The $40,000 she moved, it's sitting in Salinger Venture Group's operating account. She didn't just give him a client list. She seeded his business with your marital assets. I thanked her, ended the call, and sat at my office desk for a long moment. Then I called Ray. How's your schedule next week? I asked. Wide open for you. Ray answered without hesitation. Good. I'm going to need you in Charlotte. Things are about to move. That night, I slept 7 hours straight. The first full night of sleep I'd had in 3 weeks. Not because everything was resolved. Because the trap had closed and the evidence was locked, and what came next wasn't a battle anymore. It was a conclusion. Monday morning arrived cold and sharp, the kind of Charlotte October day that makes the air smell like something ending. I was at my office by 7:30. Dana, my office manager, had the coffee going and the morning report stacked neatly on the corner of my desk. I'd called her Friday afternoon and told her only what she needed to know, that I was expecting an unauthorized visitor, possibly that week, and that she should follow my instructions exactly when the moment came. Dana had been with me for 9 years. She didn't ask unnecessary questions. She just nodded and said, "Tell me what you need." I settled in and worked through the morning, 2 client calls, a compliance review for the county contract, a follow-up with our state agency liaison. Normal work, the kind that reminds you why you built something in the first place. Lance Salinger walked in at 11:14 a.m. I heard Dana's voice first, politely firm from the reception area, and then his smooth, unhurried, already performing. I stood up from my desk and walked to the doorway of my office. He dressed for the occasion. Dark jacket, open collar, the studied casualness of a man who wanted to look like he belonged in a room he'd never earned. He was holding a slim leather portfolio like a prop in a play he'd written for himself. When he saw me, he smiled. The same smile, I imagined, he'd used on half a dozen other men before me. "Stephen," he said, extending a hand. "Glad you're in. I thought we should finally meet properly." I didn't take the hand. I looked at him for a moment, long enough to let him feel the weight of it, then said, "Dana, please call building security." His smile held, but his eyes shifted. "There's no need for that. I just want 5 minutes. You're not going to get them," I replied evenly. "You're also not going to get the client contracts, the state agency agreements, the licensing registrations, or the business infrastructure you and my wife have been planning to absorb. None of that belongs to you. None of it ever will." He lowered the portfolio slightly. The performance was slipping. "You don't have to make this adversarial. We can structure something that works for everyone." I stepped closer, not aggressively, just close enough that he understood the distance was intentional. "You called my personal cell phone and told me you wanted the infrastructure of my firm. You sent someone to my office to deliver a message. And you filed a fraudulent business registration using my federal ID. I kept my voice level. That's not a negotiation. That's a criminal record in progress." The color in his face changed. Security arrived behind him. 2 men, quiet and professional. Lance looked over his shoulder, then back at me, and I watched the calculation happen behind his eyes. The moment a man realizes the hand he thought he was holding is empty. "You're making a mistake," he said, but the confidence had drained out of it. "The only mistake I made," I answered, "was not paying attention sooner. That one's on me. Everything that happens next is on you." Security walked him out without incident. He didn't look back. I returned to my desk, called Carolyn, and gave her the full account while it was still fresh. She documented it, added it to the file, and told me the fraudulent LLC filing had already been flagged by the state and referred for investigation. "The chain is complete," she said. "Wire fraud, unauthorized use of your registration, documented conspiracy to misappropriate business assets." His attorney, if he gets a good one, will tell him to settle every claim immediately and quietly. After the call, Ray appeared in my office doorway. He'd been in the building's ground floor coffee shop the entire morning, available if I needed him. That's the kind of man Ray Brunner is. "Clean?" he asked. "Clean," I confirmed. He nodded once, satisfied. and when to get us both a coffee. I sat at my desk and felt the silence of a problem that had just run out of room to move. The office was still mine. The contracts were still mine. And Lance Salinger was walking back to wherever he'd come from with nothing but the portfolio he'd carried in as a prop. That afternoon I went home, and I waited for the phone to ring. Pamela called at 9:47 p.m. I was in the guest room, reading, when the phone buzzed on the nightstand. Her name on the screen. She'd been out since mid-afternoon. I'd heard the car leave around 4 and hadn't heard it return. Now it was nearly 10, and she was calling instead of coming inside. I let it ring twice. Then I answered. "Stephen." Her voice was tight, pressurized. "What did you do?" "You'll need to be more specific," I said. "Lance called me." Her words came faster now, that careful composure starting to fracture. "He said you had security remove him from your building. He said you threatened him with fraud charges." "That is not what we agreed." "We didn't agree to anything, Pamela." I cut in, my voice steady. "You made plans with another man using my business registration, my client list, and my marital assets. That's not an agreement. That's a crime." Silence. "Then, you're overreacting. You don't have proof of any." "I have the fraudulent LLC filing with my federal ID," I said. "I have the financial transfer records. $40,000 moved in 7 months to Salinger Venture Group's operating account. I have a document you photographed in my study and emailed to him. I have the metadata, the timestamps, the outbound transmission logs." I paused. "And I have what you told Tammy on the back patio 3 weeks ago about the property-linked account and the timeline." The silence that followed was a different kind. Not the silence of someone gathering an argument. The silence of someone watching the walls close in. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. Lower. More careful. "Stephen, listen to me. We can still figure this out. Whatever you think happened, this doesn't have to go where you're taking it. We've been together 14 years. That has to mean something." I said nothing. She kept going, and her voice softened further, the way it did when she was trying to reach the version of me she thought she still had access to. "Maybe I made some mistakes. Maybe we both did. But we could slow this down. Take the filing off the table for now. Give it a month. Just 1 month." A pause. And when she spoke again, there was something genuine in it, or something that sounded genuine enough to sting. "What if we still have a chance? What if this whole thing went too far and we both know it?" I listened to her all the way through. Then I said, "You know what, Pamela, maybe you're right. Maybe we moved too fast. Maybe there's still something worth looking at here." Dead silence on her end. I could feel her recalibrating, the sharp intake of breath that wasn't quite hope and wasn't quite relief. "Really?" she said. One word, barely above a whisper. "No," I said, and I ended the call. I set the phone on the nightstand and sat in the quiet for a moment, listening to the house. No footsteps in the hall. No sound of key in the front door. Just the old wall clock in the kitchen, keeping its steady count. 20 minutes later, headlights swept across the bedroom window. Her car pulled into the driveway. I heard the engine shut off. I heard the car door open. And then, for a long time, nothing. Just Pamela sitting in the driveway in the dark because she had nowhere left to go that wasn't already compromised. She came inside eventually, walked past the guest room without stopping. In the morning, Carolyn called before 8. "The state has formally opened a fraud investigation into Salinger Venture Group," she said. "Lance Salinger's attorney made contact with my office at 7 this morning. They're looking to settle all civil claims immediately to avoid further exposure." She let that land, then added, "And I've spoken to the county. Your state agency contracts are fully secured. No disruption." I thanked her and hung up. Then I went to the kitchen and made coffee. Black, same as every morning, and stood at the window looking out the backyard. The oak tree we planted together. The stone patio I'd laid over a Labor Day weekend 14 years ago, one flat stone at a time. I'd built this life with both hands. She tried to take it apart with a borrowed plan and a man who turned out to be nothing more than a well-dressed liability. The county contract email was waiting in my inbox when I sat down at the desk. Approved. Renewed for 3 years. I read it twice. Then I got to work. The morning Carolyn scheduled the confrontation meeting, I drove to the office first. Not because I had urgent work. I just needed the familiar weight of the place around me before the day got complicated. I walked the floors, checked in with the county liaison about the contract renewal, reviewed 2 compliance reports. Normal work. The anchor kind. At 11, I drove to Carolyn's office. Ray was already in the parking garage when I pulled in. He'd driven up from Raleigh the night before and stayed at a hotel downtown. No drama, no questions, just present when I needed him. That's the measure of a man worth keeping in your life. We rode the elevator up together in silence. Pamela was already in the conference room when we arrived, seated to the left of her attorney, a man named Gerald Putnam, who'd been in family law for 30 years and had the look of someone who'd seen every version of this conversation. He was reviewing documents when we walked in. When he saw the size of Carolyn's binder, his hand slowed. Pamela looked up. She was dressed carefully, composed on the surface, the way she always was in rooms where appearances mattered. But there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. The particular stillness of a person who's been running hard and just hit a wall. I sat down across from her, folded my hands on the table, and said nothing. Carolyn opened without ceremony. She walked Gerald Putnam through the evidence file tab by tab. The financial transfer records, $40,000 moved over 7 months into Salinger Venture Group's account. The fraudulent LLC filing using my federal registration ID, traced by metadata to Pamela's device, sent from her personal email, submitted by Lance Salinger. The preliminary partnership agreement naming my firm's 2 largest state agency contracts as transferable assets. The conversation documented from the back patio, Tammy Briggs present, Pamela's own words describing the timeline and the property-linked account she intended to access before the divorce filing. Then Clause 11 of the prenuptial agreement. Carolyn read it aloud, slowly and clearly. Gerald Putnam stopped taking notes about halfway through. Pamela's attorney leaned toward her and said something quiet. She shook her head slightly. He leaned in again. This time she went still. When Carolyn finished, Putnam looked up. His expression had the resigned quality of a man recalibrating in real time. "My client would like to discuss a negotiated resolution," he said. "There isn't one," Carolyn replied simply. Clause 11 is unambiguous. The documented breach voids all marital asset claims. The fraud investigation into Salinger Venture Group is already open with the state. My client isn't here to negotiate. He's here to close. Pamela looked at me then, directly, for the first time since we'd sat down. I held her gaze without flinching, without anger, without satisfaction. Just steady. She opened her mouth, closed it. Then, quietly, she said, "I didn't think you'd actually do this." "I know," I said. "That was your first mistake." Her jaw tightened. 14 years, Stephen. You're really going to sit there and... You sat across from me at dinner for 8 months. I cut in, my voice level but firm, while you moved money out of our joint accounts and planned to hand my business to another man. You want to talk about 14 years? I'll listen. But those 8 months exist inside those 14, and you don't get to pretend they don't. She looked away. Gerald Putnam placed a hand briefly on the table, a signal, not a touch, and she went quiet. The signing took 20 minutes. Pamela's hand moved slowly on the final page, but moved. When she set the pen down, she didn't look up. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and nodded to Ray. He stood with me. As we walked out, I heard Gerald Putnam's voice behind us, low and measured, talking to Carolyn about the remaining filings. The door closed behind us, and the corridor was quiet. Ray walked beside me to the elevator without speaking. When the doors opened and we stepped inside, he finally said, "You okay?" "Yeah," I told him. "I'm okay." He nodded. "Good. Then let's go get lunch. You look like you haven't eaten a real meal in a month." I almost laughed. It was the most Ray thing he'd ever said, and it was exactly what I needed to hear. The movers came on a Saturday morning, 3 weeks after the signing. Pamela had arranged everything herself. 2 men with a flatbed truck, efficient and quiet, working through the list she'd provided. Clothes, books, the framed artwork that had never really matched anything, but that she'd always insisted on keeping. I stood in the front doorway and watched them work without interfering. She stayed in her car the entire time, parked at the curb, engine off, window cracked. I didn't approach. She didn't get out. When the truck pulled away, she started the engine and sat for another moment. Then she drove off without looking back. I watched her taillights disappear around the corner at the end of the block and felt something settle in my chest. Not relief exactly, more like the quiet that follows a long storm. I went inside and walked through the rooms. The house felt different, Not empty, just clarified. The way a workspace feels after you've cleared out everything that didn't belong there. On the kitchen counter was a sealed envelope with my name on it. Her handwriting, the old version, the careful, deliberate letters she used before everything turned sharp. Inside, a check, dated and signed, for the exact amount of money she'd transferred into Salinger Venture Group over 7 months. No note explaining it, just the number, precise to the dollar. Like an acknowledgement she couldn't bring herself to put into words. Beneath it, a single page printed from her email. A message she'd sent Lance Salinger 4 months ago. I recognized the timestamp, recognized the subject line. In it she described our morning routine. The way I made coffee. The way I checked the mailbox at the same time every day. She called it tedious, called me predictable, the kind of man who made a good background for other people's lives. He'd replied, "At least predictable men are easy to plan around." I read it once. Then I folded it and set it on the counter. I understood why she'd left it. It wasn't cruelty. It was honesty, her version of closing a door, showing me what the inside of her thinking had looked like. So I didn't spend the next 5 years wondering. I didn't spend 5 minutes wondering. I already knew. 2 months later, Ray called me on a Sunday afternoon. "Have you seen Lance Salinger's Instagram?" he asked. I hadn't been looking. I pulled it up while Ray stayed on the line. The most recent post was a beach photo, turquoise water, white sand, somewhere in the Caribbean that I couldn't immediately place. Lance in sunglasses, arm around a woman who wasn't Pamela. The caption read, "Starting fresh with someone who actually knows what real looks like." Last chapter taught me that the wrong partner poisons everything. Grateful to be past it. The wrong partner. He'd walked away from a fraud investigation, settled every civil claim against him at significant cost, and was now on a beach calling Pamela the problem. I set the phone down and looked out at the backyard. The oak tree, the stone patio, all of it still standing, still mine. Ray's voice came through the speaker. "You believe that guy?" "Completely," I said. "That's exactly who he is." Ray laughed. Short, dry, the laugh of a man who'd seen enough of the world to find it more absurd than surprising. I went out to the patio that afternoon with a glass of iced tea and sat in the chair I'd had out there for a decade. The late autumn light was doing something good across the yard, long and golden, the kind that makes everything look like it's been there forever. I thought about what I wanted the next chapter to look like. Not what I was walking away from. That was settled and signed and done. What I was walking toward. The county contract had been renewed for 3 years. 2 new clients had come on board in October. The firm was in the strongest position it had been in 5 years, maybe more. I had work that mattered, a cousin who drove up from Raleigh when I needed him, and an attorney who'd navigated the whole thing like a surgeon who actually liked her work. The house was quiet in the best way now. The clock on the kitchen wall still ticked the same as always. The oak tree in the backyard didn't care about any of what had happened. I finished the iced tea, went inside, and started making dinner. Not for anyone else, just for me. And that was exactly how it was supposed to be right now.
Hello and welcome to Heartbreak Stories. Today's story is about a man who built his entire life around a woman only to discover she had been quietly dismantling it from the inside for years. Get comfortable because this one is going to hit hard.
I reached into her coat pocket, looking for my keys. What I found instead ended 9 years of marriage in 30 seconds. She never saw it coming. Neither did I. Until everything I thought I knew turned out to be a lie I'd been living inside. My name is Clayton Burke. I'm 44 years old. I'm the branch director of Harwick First National Bank in Columbus, Ohio, and up until 8 months ago, I thought I had a life most men would trade for without hesitation. Good career, nice house in Clintonville, a wife named Rita who had green eyes, a sharp mind, and a laugh that used to fill every room she walked into. We met when she was 26, working as a junior analyst at a firm that handled some of our commercial accounts. I was 35, already running a mid-sized branch. She was the smartest person in every meeting she walked into, and she wasn't shy about it. I respected that. I fell for that. We got married 2 years later. No kids, we kept saying soon, and soon kept sliding further down the calendar. Looking back, I wonder if that was the first sign I ignored. Rita always had a reason to postpone. Career timing, travel, savings goals. Reasonable things. But there were a lot of reasonable things that, lined up one after another, started to look less like planning and more like avoidance. I should have paid closer attention, but I was busy building something, and I trusted her to be building it with me. The morning everything shifted, I wasn't even looking for trouble. It was a Thursday in late October. Rita had already left for work, or said she had. I was running behind, looking for my car keys, and I checked her coat on the hook near the door out of habit. Keys weren't there, but something else was. A phone. Small, dark, tucked flat into the inside pocket of her winter coat, like it had been carefully placed, not dropped. It wasn't her usual phone. Hers was the newer model with a blue case and a small scratch on the corner. This one was older, cheap, the kind you buy prepaid at a gas station. I held it for a long moment. Just held it. My thumb hovered over the button without pressing it. I set it back, found my keys, got in my car, drove halfway to the bank before I turned around. I don't know what made me go back. I'm not the suspicious type, or I wasn't. I'd never gone through her messages, never checked her location, never asked more than once where she was going. I believed in trust the way some men believe in gravity. You don't think about it, it's just there. But something in the weight of that phone, something about the way it was hidden rather than forgotten, reached into my chest and twisted. Back at the house, I found the coat, found the phone, and this time I turned it on. The screen lit up without a passcode. Dozens of messages. A contact saved only as G. No last name, no context, just a single letter sitting there like it was trying to disappear. The messages were casual in the worst possible way. Familiar, comfortable, easy. The kind of shorthand people develop when they've been talking long enough to drop every pretense. I scrolled back. The thread went deep. Months, not weeks. Then I found the last message Rita had sent the night before at 11:47 p.m. while I was asleep in the next room. I know you're upset. I'll make it up to you, I promise. I read it twice, then a third time. She hadn't sent that to me. She'd sent it to him. Whoever G was, he was upset, and she was promising to fix it. In our house, in our time, with words she'd never once said to me when I was the one who needed to hear them. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter. Quietly. No throwing, no slamming. I just stood there in the silence of that kitchen and let it settle in my bones. Then I went to the closet, pulled out my overnight bag, and started packing. Not frantically, methodically. Shirts, pants, toiletries, my laptop, my passport. The same way I packed for a business trip, because some part of my brain was already treating this like a departure with no return date. I was out the door by 8:15. Rita sent me a text at 9:40. Morning, don't forget dinner's at 7. I looked at the message and said nothing. Just slid the phone into my jacket pocket and walked into my bank like it was any other day, because if I'd stopped to feel everything I was feeling right then, I wouldn't have been able to stand up straight. And I was not going to fall apart in a parking lot. Not yet. Not for her. I didn't go to the office that day. First time in 11 years, I called in without being sick. I told my assistant I had a family situation, which was technically true, just not in the way she probably imagined. Instead, I drove to a coffee shop on the far side of Columbus, a place Rita had never been, a place with no history attached to it. Ordered a black coffee I barely touched, and sat in the back corner with my laptop open like a man who had work to do. I did have work to do, just not the kind Harwick First National was paying me for. I started with what I knew. The phone, the contacts saved as G, the message thread going back months. I needed a name. I needed context. And I needed to understand exactly how deep this went before I made a single move. I pulled up the bank's internal directory on my personal laptop. Not the work system, no digital footprint I didn't want, and started going through the roster of staff who worked closely with Rita in her capacity as a financial analyst. She consulted regularly with our commercial lending team. That was a dozen people. One name surfaced faster than the others. Garrett Hollins, 38 years old, senior loan officer, 2 years at her branch. Before that, a mid-tier investment firm in Cincinnati. I'd personally reviewed his hire, signed off on his onboarding. He was good at his job, precise, client-friendly, reliable in meetings. I'd even mentioned him to the regional director as someone with upward potential. I sat with that for a moment. Then I kept digging. I checked Rita's calendar. She'd shared it with me years ago for scheduling purposes, and she'd never revoked access. Oversight or arrogance? Either way, it served me now. The entries were careful, but not careful enough. Team lunch, CR department. 7 times in 3 months on days, I knew the commercial relations team didn't hold regular lunches. Offsite review, Pinnacle files. Twice. Training session, downtown. Once on a Saturday. A Saturday. I wrote every date down in a notebook. Old habit from my banking days. Paper doesn't get hacked, doesn't sync to shared clouds, doesn't show up in Discovery unless you put it there yourself. Then I called Naomi. Naomi Rhodes and I had been friends since we were both 22, working our first real jobs at the same downtown Columbus firm. She'd gone into corporate accounting, built a solid career, and remained the most straightforward person I'd ever known. She never softened things to protect your feelings, and she was the only person outside my marriage I genuinely trusted. She picked up on the second ring. "You never called during a work day," Naomi said. "What happened? I need to talk." Not on the phone. A pause. "How bad?" "Bad enough that I didn't go in today." She was at the coffee shop within 40 minutes. I laid it out plainly. The hidden phone, the message thread, the name I suspected, the calendar entries that didn't add up. Naomi listened without interrupting, which was unusual for her. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and studied me the way she always did when she was deciding how honest to be. "You think it's Hollins," she said finally. Not a question. The timing fits. The access fits. And Rita mentioned him twice in the last 2 months. Casually, like she was testing whether his name registered. Naomi's jaw tightened. "Clayton, he was at your branch anniversary dinner in September. I saw them talking by the bar. I thought nothing of it. I felt that land somewhere behind my ribs." "How long were they talking?" "Long enough that I noticed. Short enough that I told myself I was reading too much into it." She reached across and put her hand flat on the table. "I'm sorry I didn't say something." "You had nothing concrete," I replied. "Neither did I. Until now." We sat with that a moment. Then Naomi straightened up. "So what's the move?" I told her I wasn't ready to confront Rita. Not yet. I needed more. I needed to understand the full scope, and I needed to do it without tipping my hand. In my line of work, you don't freeze accounts until you've documented everything. You don't move until the case is clean. Naomi nodded slowly. "And Hollins? He comes in Monday. I'll watch. I won't act. Not yet." She looked at me carefully. "You're very calm for a man whose wife is." "I know what she's doing," I said, cutting in quietly. Being calm is the only thing I can control right now. After Naomi left, I sat alone and opened the notes app on my phone. I started a private document. Dates, names, observations. I also did something I'd never done in 18 years of marriage. I contacted a private investigator, a former bank fraud specialist I knew through professional channels. A man named Roy Peck, thorough and discreet. Roy answered on the first ring. I gave him Garrett Hollins' name, Rita's schedule, and 3 specific dates from her calendar. "How far back do you want me to go?" Roy asked. I thought about the hidden phone, about the months-deep thread, about a Saturday marked training session. "Go back a year," I told him, "and assume it started before that." Roy Peck worked fast. By Thursday, he had a preliminary report waiting in my email, encrypted exactly as I'd asked. I opened it at a diner 3 blocks from the bank, read it twice over eggs I didn't eat, then folded the laptop closed and sat looking at the wall for a while. Garrett Hollins and Rita. Confirmed. Photos taken at a restaurant in the short north on 2 separate evenings. A hotel in Dublin, Ohio. Receipt matched to a card in Hollins' name. On the date, Rita had marked off-site review in her calendar. Roy had also pulled Hollins' professional history and found something that hadn't come up in the original hiring background check. A prior HR complaint at a Cincinnati firm, filed by a married colleague, quietly settled and expunged when he resigned. I'd hired a man with a pattern. I closed my eyes for a moment. Not in grief, in focus. Everything I was feeling, and I was feeling plenty, had to go into a box until I knew exactly what I was dealing with. That's a skill you develop when you run a bank branch. You learn to separate the fire from the fuel. Friday morning, I called Roy back. "How far does the history go?" I asked. "Sir, the current situation, I can place them together as far back as 11 months. But I found something else." A pause. "Your wife maintained a separate email account. I can't access the content legally, but the account was created approximately 3 years into your marriage. 3 years. Rita and I have been married 9 years. She'd been building an exit strategy, or at least a separate life, for the last 6. I thanked Roy and ended the call. Then I sat in my car in the bank parking lot for exactly 4 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on the dash. For minutes of letting everything hit me at once. The waste of it, the years spent building a life with someone who'd been quietly undermining it the whole time. Then I got out of the car, straightened my jacket, and walked into the building. Garrett Hollins was already at his desk. He looked up when I passed, gave me the usual morning nod. I nodded back. Same as always. That evening I called Naomi and read her the highlights of Roy's report. She listened without interrupting, but I heard her breath change when I mentioned the hidden email account. 3 years ago, you were working 60-hour weeks, she said quietly. That merger nearly put you under. I know. She chose that window deliberately. I hadn't said it that way, but she was right. Rita had been patient, strategic. The same qualities I'd admired in her as a professional had been turned against me as a husband. What's next? Naomi asked. I need to confront her, I answered, but not before I talked to Dana Fuller. Dana was my attorney, a referral from Naomi as it happened. Sharp, no nonsense, the kind of lawyer who spoke in facts and didn't waste your time with sentiment. I got her on the phone Saturday morning. Bring me everything Roy documented, Dana said, after I'd given her the outline. The photos, the hotel receipt, the calendar entries, your own notes. In Ohio, documented infidelity doesn't determine asset division, but it absolutely informs the narrative if she tries to claim constructive abandonment or emotional neglect. A brief pause. Is there any chance she's aware you know? None, I said. She sent me a text yesterday about dinner reservations. Good. Keep it that way until we're ready. Dana's voice was level and precise. Don't move money. Don't change passwords. Don't do anything that signals a shift. We build a case first. Then you move. I spent the rest of that Saturday at Naomi's kitchen table, going through documents while she made coffee and said nothing unless I asked. That's the thing about real friends. They understand that sometimes the best thing they can offer is a steady presence and a full pot. By evening, the file was organized, dated, and ready for Dana. I drove home at 9. Rita was on the couch, laptop open, glass of wine beside her. She looked up and smiled. The same smile she'd always had, the one that used to mean something. Long day, she asked. Long week, I replied, walking past her to the kitchen. I poured a glass of water, stood at the counter, and listened to her talk about some Word presentation she was preparing. I answered in the right places. I looked at her when it was natural to look. And the whole time, behind everything I said, there was just one clear, cold thought running on a loop. She has no idea what's already in motion. I chose Sunday morning, not because it was symbolic, because Rita had no work obligations, no appointments to hide behind, no reason to cut the conversation short. I wanted her cornered, not physically, not cruelly, but conversationally. No exits. She was in the kitchen when I came downstairs, making coffee, still in her robe, hair pulled up the way she wore it on weekends. She looked relaxed. That was the word. Relaxed, in a house I was about to change the temperature of permanently. I sat down at the kitchen table and set Roy's printed summary. 2 pages, no photos yet, just dates and locations, face up between us. Rita turned, saw the papers, and went very still. Sit down, I said. Not harshly, just firmly enough that it wasn't a request. She sat. She looked at the papers without touching them, then looked at me. Something moved behind her eyes. Calculation, not guilt. Clayton, read the first page, I said. She didn't. She kept her eyes on mine. Where did you get this? Read it, Rita. A long pause. Then she looked down. I watched her face as she read. The way it shifted from controlled to brittle as the dates stacked up. When she finished, she set the paper down with hands that weren't quite steady. It's not what it looks like, she said quietly. Tell me what it looks like to you, I replied, and we'll compare notes. Her jaw tightened. She didn't like that. Rita was used to being the sharpest person in the room, and being outmaneuvered on her own ground unsettled her more than I'd expected. We got close, she said finally. It got out of hand. It's been over for 2 months. Has it? Yes. She met my eyes with something that might have been sincerity if I didn't know better by then. Clayton, I know I hurt you. I know this looks terrible, but it meant nothing. It was a mistake I let go too far, and I ended it. I let that sit for a moment. Then I leaned forward slightly. The hotel in Dublin was November 14th, I said. I have a receipt. Your last message to him on that phone was 4 days ago. So let's try this again without the part where you tell me it's over. The color left her face. You went through my things, she said, voice tightening. You had a second phone in your coat pocket. I shot back evenly. Don't talk to me about boundaries. She stood up, crossed her arms, her default armor, and turned toward the window. So what do you want, Clayton? You want me to grovel? You want me to beg? I want the truth, I said. All of it. How long? How often? And whether you ever brought him into this house. A silence. Outside, a neighbor's dog was barking somewhere down the block. Rita's shoulders rose once, then fell. 8 months, she said to the window. Not here. Never here. 8 months. The number landed like something physical. I've been trusting her, building plans with her, talking about the future with her, for 8 months while she was running a second life 3 miles away. I stood up slowly. I'll be staying at a hotel tonight. My attorney will be in touch with yours by end of week. She spun around. You're not even going to try to work through this. I picked up the documents from the table and looked at her. Really looked, the way you look at something you're seeing clearly for the first time. You had 8 months to work through it, Rita. You spent them hiding a phone in your coat. I walked out of the kitchen. Behind me, I heard her say my name once, then again, then nothing. I took the stairs, finished packing the bag I'd quietly prepared the night before, and was out the front door in under 10 minutes. She sent me a text 40 minutes later. I saw the notification light up the screen on the passenger seat. Please come back. We can fix this. I'll make it up to you. I watched the screen go dark. I never opened it. I was already gone. The hotel room I checked into was clean, quiet, and completely anonymous. That suited me fine. I didn't need comfort right now. I needed clarity, and sometimes clarity comes easier when you strip the surroundings down to nothing. Monday morning, I was back at the bank. Professional mask on, jacket pressed, the same Clayton Burke who'd walked those halls for 11 years. Garrett Hollins came in at 8:30. I watched him settle at his desk through the glass partition of my office, pour his coffee, pull up his screen. Ordinary, relaxed, a man with no idea that the ground beneath him had already shifted. I didn't approach him. Dana had been specific about that. Nothing confrontational at the workplace until the legal framework was in place. So I observed, documented, and waited. What I hadn't anticipated was my mother. Irene Mercer called me Tuesday at noon. She was 68, sharp as a tack, and lived 40 minutes outside Columbus in the same house she and my father had built in 1981. She didn't call during my workday unless something was wrong. Rita came to see me yesterday, she said, without preamble. I set down my pen. What did she say? She said you'd left without explanation, that you'd been distant for months, that she was worried about your mental state, and that she was trying to hold things together. My mother's voice was careful, measured. She cried, Clayton. Sat at my kitchen table and cried. I let a beat pass. Did you believe her? A long pause. I believe she was scared. Whether the story she told was true, that's a different question. You're my son. I know how you operate. You don't go quiet without a reason. I have a reason, I said. A documented one. I can't get into it today, but I will. I need you to not engage with Rita until I can sit down with you. Can you do that for me? Another pause, shorter this time. Yes, but Clayton. Her voice gentled slightly. Whatever this is, you call me. You don't carry it alone. I know, Mom. I'll come Saturday. I ended the call and sat with it for a moment. Rita had moved fast. She'd gone to my mother before I'd even spoken to a judge, before any papers had been filed, before she knew the full extent of what I had on her. She was building her version of the story while mine was still being assembled. I called Naomi that evening and told her about my mother's visit. Classic, Naomi said flatly. She's working the perimeter. If she can't get to you, she'll work the people around you. My mother didn't buy it, I replied. Good. What about Garrett? Still at his desk, every morning like nothing happened. I paused. Dana says I can address the employment situation once the divorce filing is confirmed. conflict of interest, professional boundary violations. It was a clean path. You're going to enjoy that part, Naomi said. I'm not going to enjoy any of it, I replied, but I'm going to do all of it. Saturday, I drove out to my mother's house. Irene met me at the door with coffee already poured and a look that said she'd been thinking about this all week. I sat at the same kitchen table Rita had sat at 3 days earlier and told my mother the truth. Not everything, not the raw, ugliest details, but enough. The hidden phone, the months of documentation. Garrett Hollins. My mother listened the way she always listened, without interrupting, without reacting dramatically, just taking it in with those steady gray eyes. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. She sat in my kitchen and performed grief, Irene said at last, while you were sitting in a hotel room with the evidence of what she actually did. That's about the size of it. Irene set her mug down firmly. Then you do what you need to do. And don't you dare apologize for it. I stayed for dinner. Drove back through the dark with the windows cracked, the cold October air moving through the car. For the first time in a week, something in my chest had settled. Not healed, nothing like that, but steadied. My mother knew the truth. The people who mattered knew the truth. Rita could tell whatever story she wanted. The facts were already filed with Dana Fuller's office. Dana called me on a Wednesday morning, 2 weeks after I'd handed her the full file. Everything's in order, she said. Petition filed this morning. Rita will be served by end of day Thursday. And Clayton, before she is, you need to deal with the situation at the bank. She was right. I've been sitting on it long enough. I called HR Director Pauline Voss at 9 and asked for a closed-door meeting at 2. Pauline was thorough and by the book, exactly what I needed. I laid out the documented relationship between Garrett Hollins and my wife, the professional boundary violations, the conflict of interest it created within the branch structure. I put Roy's photographs on the table and let them speak. Pauline's expression didn't change. She took notes and said she'd loop in regional compliance before the day was out. By 4 o'clock, Garrett Hollins was in that same conference room without me. I didn't watch. I didn't need to. I was in my office reviewing Q4 reports when Naomi texted, "Heard from a friend at your branch. Someone packed a box today." I read the message and set my phone face down on the desk. Rita was served Thursday afternoon. She called me 11 times between 4 and 7 p.m. I let every call go. At 7:18, a text arrived. "This is not what I wanted. Please call me. We need to talk like adults." I forwarded it to Dana and said nothing else. Friday, Naomi came by the hotel with takeout and a bottle of decent bourbon. We sat at the small table by the window, and she let me talk about the 9 years, about the merger when I'd worked myself to the bone and Rita had been quietly building a second life, about the version of her I'd been holding on along after the real one had moved on. "You're not grieving her," Naomi said at one point, watching me carefully. "You're grieving who you thought she was." I looked at her across the table. "Is there a difference?" "All the difference in the world," she replied. "One of them was real. The other one was yours." I turned that over for a while. Outside the window, Columbus moved in its usual Friday night rhythm, indifferent and ongoing. "She went to my mother," I said. "I know." Naomi refilled her glass. "And your mother sent her packing?" "Not exactly." She listened, then called me. "Same thing," Naomi said with a small, firm smile. I raised my glass slightly. She raised hers back. It wasn't a celebration. It was something quieter and more durable than that. Two people who'd known each other long enough to sit in the hard parts of a story without needing to dress it up. The bourbon was good. The night was cold. And for the first time since I'd found that phone in Rita's coat pocket, I felt like myself again. Not the version of me that had been waiting for something to go wrong, but the one who knew exactly what to do when it did. Dana called on a Monday morning with the kind of measured calm that meant something had broken in our favor. Rita's attorney filed a counterclaim Friday afternoon, she said. Emotional neglect, constructive abandonment, claims you were consistently unavailable during the marriage. Standard playbook when the documented party needs a counterweight. A pause. They're also requesting a 50-50 split on all marital assets, including your pension and the Clintonville property. I was sitting at the hotel desk with my second coffee, watching morning traffic move below the window. "What's our position?" "Strong," Dana replied. The infidelity documentation neutralizes the neglect narrative considerably. But I want to strengthen our timeline further. Is there anything from earlier in the marriage, communications, records, anything that establishes the pattern on her end predates what Roy documented? I thought about it. Then I remembered the attic. When we bought the Clintonville house 7 years ago, Rita had moved boxes of old personal items up there. Journals, correspondence, things she described as old junk I can't throw away. I'd never touched them. Never had a reason to. I called Naomi. I need to get into the house. I told her. Rita's at work Tuesdays until 6. I still have a key and my name's on the deed. I need 30 minutes in the attic. I'm driving, Naomi said, without a second's hesitation. Tuesday afternoon, we let ourselves in through the back door. The house smelled different, a candle I didn't recognize, something floral and foreign. I moved fast up the stairs, up the attic pull down into the low-ceilinged space above our bedroom. The boxes were where they'd always been. I went through 3 before I found what I was looking for, and what I found was worse than I'd prepared myself for. A bundle of printed emails, rubber-banded together, dated from the 3rd year of our marriage. Not from Garrett Hollins. A different name entirely. A man named Paul. No last name on the messages themselves, but the email domain matched a firm Rita had worked for briefly before joining our bank's client network. The messages were unambiguous. They ran for 4 months. They stopped abruptly, no explanation. 3 years into our marriage. She'd been doing this since year 3. I photographed every page with my phone, replaced the bundle exactly as I'd found it, and climbed back down. Naomi was waiting at the bottom of the attic stairs. She looked at my face and didn't ask a single question until we were back in the car. "How bad?" she said. "She started in year 3, I replied. "Different man. Before Hollins." Naomi stared straight through the windshield. 9 years, Clayton. I know. She never stopped. She just rotated. I didn't answer that. I didn't need to. We drove back in near silence, and I sat with the specific weight of understanding that I hadn't lost a marriage. I never fully had one. I sent the photographs to Dana that evening. She called within the hour. "This changes the timeline substantially," Dana said. "If we can establish a pattern of behavior going back to year 3, the neglect counterclaim becomes very difficult to sustain. A spouse who has been serially unfaithful cannot credibly argue the marriage failed because of the other party's emotional distance." A brief pause. "Clayton, this is a strong case. She's not getting half the pension." I set the phone down and sat in the quiet of the hotel room. 9 years. A hidden phone. An attic full of evidence she'd never thought to destroy. A man she'd married who turned out to be better at documentation than she'd anticipated. I picked up my phone and texted Naomi. "Dana says it's strong." The reply came back in under a minute. "I know. So do you." 3 weeks after the petition was filed, Rita showed up at my hotel. I don't know how she found out which one. Probably through mutual acquaintances, possibly through her attorney's investigative resources. It didn't matter. What mattered was that she was standing in the corridor outside room 214 when I came back from an evening run, hair pulled back, no makeup, wearing the kind of plain clothes that said she dressed down deliberately. She looked tired, genuinely tired, not performed. 5 minutes, she said. "That's all I'm asking." I considered it for a moment. Then I opened the door and stepped aside. She came in and stood near the window, arms folded loosely. Not the defensive armor I'd seen in the kitchen confrontation, just someone who didn't know what to do with her hands. I stayed near the door. I didn't offer her a seat. "I know about the counterclaim," I said. "If you came to sell me the neglect narrative in person, you've wasted a drive." "I didn't come about the case," she said quietly. "I came because I wanted to say something to you directly, not through attorneys." I waited. She looked at the floor for a moment. When she looked back up, something in her expression had dropped the strategy entirely. "I made choices I can't undo. I know that. I'm not asking you to forgive me or take me back. I needed you to know that what we had in the beginning was real. For me, before I started making it into something it wasn't." I looked at her for a long moment. "Rita, I found the emails from year 3. The color left her face. "The bundle in the attic," I said. "The man named Paul. For months, early in our marriage." I kept my voice level. "So, when you tell me the beginning was real, I need you to define what beginning you mean. Because mine started at the wedding. She opened her mouth, closed it, pressed her lips together. That was a mistake I buried, she said finally. I convinced myself it never happened. You convinced yourself, I repeated. And in the meantime, I spent 9 years believing I was building something with someone who was present. Her eyes filled. This time, I believed the tears were genuine. But genuine grief for being caught is still a different thing from genuine remorse for causing damage. And I'd learned to tell the difference. I'm sorry, she said, low, stripped of anything rehearsed. Truly, I believe you mean that right now, I replied. It doesn't change the filing. She nodded slowly. Didn't argue. Didn't push. She picked up her jacket from the chair she'd set it on and moved toward the door. As she passed me, she stopped for just a moment. You deserved better, she said, without looking at me. I knew that the whole time. She left. The door clicked shut behind her.
She knew the whole time he deserved better, and she chose to stay silent and keep hurting him anyway. I don't know what's harder to accept, the betrayal itself, or the fact that she was fully aware of what she was doing to this man.
I stood in the middle of the room for a while, letting the silence settle. No rage, no urge to call her back, no second-guessing. Just a steady, clear sense of finality, the kind that comes not from winning an argument, but from understanding completely and without remainder that there is nothing left to argue about. I called Naomi. She picked up on the second ring. She came to the hotel, I said. What did she want? To apologize, I replied, and to find out how much I knew. Did it change anything? I looked at the closed door. Not a thing. The hearing was set for a Thursday in January, 9 weeks after Dana had filed the petition. Columbus in January is a particular kind of gray, low sky, bare trees, the kind of cold that doesn't announce itself dramatically but just settles in and stays. I drove to the courthouse alone. Naomi had offered to come. I told her I'd call after. This was something I needed to do, standing on my own 2 feet. Dana was already in the corridor outside the courtroom when I arrived, briefcase open on a bench, reviewing notes with a focused efficiency I'd come to rely on. She looked up when she heard my footsteps. She's here, Dana said. Her attorney tried to reach me yesterday about a last-minute settlement discussion. I told them we'd hear what they had to say after the session opens. What are they offering? We'll find out. She snapped the briefcase shut. But whatever it is, it's coming from a position of weakness. That email bundle from the attic changed the calculus for Gerald Price. He knows what a pattern of conduct argument does to his clients standing in front of this judge. I nodded. We walked in together. Rita was already seated at the opposing table with Gerald Price, a composed man in a dark suit who carried the practiced neutrality of someone paid to show nothing. Rita was in a charcoal blazer, hair up. She looked composed until the moment I sat down, and then she looked at the table. The judge was a woman named Honorable Carol Strickland, direct, unhurried, clearly someone who had seen every flavor of marital dissolution and was not interested in theater. She opened by acknowledging both filings and inviting preliminary statements. Gerald Price spoke first. He laid out Rita's position with technical precision. The marriage had deteriorated due to mutual distance. The documented incidents were a symptom rather than a cause, and his client sought an equitable division of all marital assets, including the pension and the Clintonville property. Dana let him finish without expression. Then she stood up. She walked the judge through the timeline. Year 3, the printed emails. The current relationship, Roy Peck's documentation. The hidden second phone. The calendar entries. Rita's visit to my mother, designed to preemptively shape the family narrative. She presented it not as drama, but as evidence, chronological, sourced, and methodical. The kind of case that doesn't need to raise its voice because the facts are already speaking at full volume. When Dana sat down, Judge Strickland studied the submitted exhibits for a long moment. Counsel, she said to Gerald Price, your client's counterclaim of constructive abandonment is difficult to sustain against a documented pattern of marital misconduct spanning multiple years. I'd encourage you to consult with your client during recess. Gerald Price consulted. Recess lasted 22 minutes. When we reconvened, the counterclaim had been withdrawn. The final terms took another hour to negotiate. Rita received a fair share of the liquid marital assets accumulated during the marriage, savings, joint accounts, a portion of appreciated value in the home. She received nothing from the pension, nothing beyond standard equity from the Clintonville property, given the documented misconduct, and no claim whatsoever to my professional accounts or career earnings. Garrett Hollins, for his part, had already been quietly terminated from Harwick First National on the basis of the professional conduct review Pauline Voss had completed. He was gone by the time the hearing took place, his departure handled through standard HR process. No spectacle, no confrontation. Just a man who had made a serious miscalculation about whose house he was playing games in. When we walked out of the courthouse, the January air hit clean and sharp. Dana shook my hand on the steps and told me the final paperwork would be processed within 30 days. I thanked her, watched her walk to her car. Then I stood on the courthouse steps for a moment, hands in my coat pockets, looking out at the street. It wasn't triumph. I want to be honest about that. There was no surge of victory, no sense of the score being settled. What filled the space where the marriage used to live was something quieter and more permanent. The particular relief of a man who has carried something very heavy for a long time and has finally, cleanly, set it down. I called Naomi from the car. "How'd it go?" she asked. "Clean," I said. "Counterclaim withdrawn. Pension protected. Property protected." A pause. "And Rita, she gets what the law says she's entitled to. Not a dollar more." Naomi was quiet for a moment. "Are you okay?" I watched a delivery truck roll through the intersection ahead of me, the driver completely unaware of what had just happened in the building behind us. Ordinary life just continuing. "I will be," I said, and I meant it. 14 months after that courthouse morning, I was in a different city. Not running, relocating. Harwick's regional director had offered me the district oversight position in Cincinnati 6 months after the divorce finalized. A role I'd been quietly considered for before everything imploded. I took it. New office, broader scope. A reason to point myself forward rather than circle the same geography where every street corner had a memory attached to it. I kept the Clintonville house for 8 months, then sold it. The number was good. I put the proceeds into an account I opened under my name only and left it there untouched while I figured out what came next. Naomi visited twice that first year. We talked on the phone every week or two, the easy, durable kind of communication that doesn't need a reason. She was still in Columbus, still sharp, still the most honest person I knew. Whatever she was in my life, she was necessary to it. And I'd stopped feeling the need to categorize it more precisely than that. My mother came to Cincinnati for Thanksgiving. We cooked badly and laughed about it, and she didn't mention Rita's name once, which was the greatest gift she could have given me. I ran into Rita on a Saturday in late February, when I was back in Columbus for a quarterly review. It wasn't planned. I was coming out of a coffee shop on High Street, and she was walking in. We both stopped. She looked older in a way that had nothing to do with years. Thinner. The composure she'd always worn like a second skin was present, but worn at the edges. She had the look of someone who had gotten the life she'd chosen and found it smaller than she'd imagined. We stood on the sidewalk for a moment that lasted about 10 seconds and felt considerably longer. "Clayton," she said. "Rita," I replied. Nothing dramatic. No speeches. She moved toward the door and I moved toward the street. And that was the full extent of it. Two people who had once meant everything to each other, reduced by choices she had made to the exchange of first names on a sidewalk. That evening I sat in my Cincinnati apartment, a clean, spare place on the 4th floor with a view of the river, and opened my laptop. I wrote out the story the way I'd been turning it over in my head for 14 months, the whole arc of it, and posted it anonymously to a Reddit community for men going through the wreckage of broken marriages. I didn't expect much. I wasn't looking for validation. What I got instead was 700 comments and a direct message inbox that took me 2 weeks to work through. Men from every state, every age bracket, every profession, saying variations of the same thing. I thought I was the only one. Thank you for putting it into words. I read every single one. I didn't respond to all of them, but I responded to the ones that needed a reply. The ones where a man was still in the thick of it, still try to decide whether to stay or go, still wondering if trusting his instincts made him paranoid or clear-eyed. To those ones I wrote the same thing, more or less. Your instincts are not the problem. The only question is whether you're willing to follow them to the truth, even when the truth costs you something. It cost me something. The 9 years, the house, the version of the future I'd built in my head. But what I kept was more valuable than any of it. My name, my record, my ability to look at myself straight. Some losses, when you examine them honestly, turn out to be the most important things you ever let go of.
9 years, and she was running a separate life for most of them. What strikes me most about this story isn't the betrayal, it's how long a person can smile at you across the dinner table while carrying a secret that would destroy everything. Clayton's story is a reminder that the people who hurt us most are rarely strangers. They're the ones we handed the keys to. If this story made you think, if it made you feel something, then it did exactly what it was supposed to do. Thank you for being here. Stay sharp, stay true to yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.